Well, as the show winds down, things get really convenient and characters start to feel very unimportant and kind of pointless. Hey guys, here from American Horror Story Roanoke, episode 9, and I was definitely looking forward to this episode. I've really been loving, especially this half of the season, more than the first half. The first half I liked. It was just, it was a documentary. There wasn't as much to it as the second half has had, and I really love what the second half has done so far. And like I said, I've been praising this show. A lot of people have been saying, oh, it's too short and things like that. This episode, though, I'm with them. I really am. I was not really a huge fan of this episode. I'm going to be honest. And let me just say, this was not a bad episode. I don't want people to think that I hated this episode, because I didn't hate this episode. I just felt like the quality of the first 8 episodes, and even the documentary ones, was not there in this episode. This was a very overstuffed and kind of pointless episode. A lot of the stuff that happened in this episode seemed like it was only there for plot reasons and not really for character. And honestly, I think this episode would have benefited a lot more if the episode was longer, which I'll get into. But let's just get into this episode, because there is some really great stuff about it. Starting off at the beginning, I actually really did like the way this episode starts, because we see these 3 friends. They're hiking through the woods in search of the Roanoke house after watching season 1, and they're basically just completely obsessed with season 1. Like, all they talk about is Roanoke and how great of a show My Roanoke Nightmare was. Now, their goal is to take photos of the house during the blood moon. They have, I guess, a blog for Roanoke, and they're discussing their love for season 1 and what drew them in when they spotted the tree from episode 3. And one of the characters, Sophie, is actually played by Thaisa, that's how you pronounce it, not Tessa, Thaisa Farmiga, who I loved seeing her again. We haven't seen her since season 3, and it was really cool to see her again in this role as Sophie. She's talking about how she loved My Roanoke Nightmare because of the way that it kind of, it talks about colonial America and things like that. Now, that part did kind of seem like, oh, this is what you're supposed to get from the season. It sounded like they were kind of shoving it down our throats. But at the same time, I really did like what they did with their character. Jacob Artis was finally introduced as Todd. I thought he was pretty good. And then Milo, the other guy, I thought he was okay. I didn't really think much of him. But they also spot a woman bloody and limping and chase after her. And the injured woman is actually none other than Diana, who, this was kind of cool the way they tied this in. We saw Diana in episode 6, and we haven't seen her since, and she crashed her car after Pigman attacked her from the back seat while she was driving. So the My Roanoke Nightmare fans discover the car with Diana dead inside. They freaked out after realizing that they chased a ghost, and that is the way that this episode starts. I thought overall it was a pretty good start, the way they did that, the way that these 3 fans, already are getting into, what's going on. I thought they set this up pretty well, and to me, it seemed like this was going to be what the rest of the season was going to be, that we were going to see these 3 fans, we were going to see the way things went with them, and that maybe they would be the ones to survive and not other characters, but we'll get into that. But overall, I thought this was a pretty good start, and it's too bad the rest of the episode was pretty mediocre after that. Because then we get back to Lee and Audrey. They find out that Dillon, who actually played one of the Butcher's Son in season 1, as we know, he played Ambrose. He has been waiting in the hotel, but when he didn't hear anything from the producers, he reported to the set as scheduled. And I thought this was interesting. We found that he was actually hired to play the Pigman this season, and he had no idea what's actually going on. He has no idea that everyone's dead. And I thought Wes Bentley did a really good job in this scene. I really did like this character of Dillon. And unfortunately, he Ubered to the house, so they can't escape in his car, unfortunately, which again, that to me just felt like it was there because, oh, we just want to create tension, there's no way of them leaving. That felt very inconvenient, and I felt like it was just there for plot reasons, and a lot of this episode is very much like that. A lot of what happens in this episode feels very much like it's just for plot reasons and not really for character. Dillon was told not to bring his phone to the house, so calling for help isn't really an option either. There's not really much they can do. They seem like they're trapped there, and Audrey tries to explain that everyone is dead, including the producers, Sydney, and after seeing the bodies, Dillon finally understands the seriousness of the situation. He thinks they need to make a stretcher for Lee and leave now before it gets dark, because he sees how bad of the condition, Lee really is in, but Lee thinks it's too far to the road, and Dina Porter was still great in this episode. I thought she overall did a really great job, but Dillon served 2 tours of duty, we find out, and he believes he can handle carrying a stretcher to the road. However, Lee and Audrey explain that they need to go to the Polk farm first and look for Monet, because now that's the reason why Lee told them there. We know why really they're going there, but they need to find Monet, and Dillon agrees that he doesn't want to leave a man behind, asks him to stay at the house for their own safety, but they can convince him that they know the way and the layout of the house, and I like the way they all went together, I like the way that was done. But then we see Todd, Milo, and Sophie. They're questioned at the police station. It turns out they actually run a fan site for the series. And in a flashback, we see their reactions to having seen the ghost and watch Todd as he attempts to come to terms with the whole ghost thing. Pretty well done scene. I like the way this was done. Sophie reminds him that the video go viral, so we'll all be worth it in the end. And let me just say, the best stuff in this episode does happen to be these three characters. I like the way they set them up, and I thought overall they were pretty interesting. But Todd, Milo, and Sophie try to convince the police that they saw Diana's ghost and that she was already dead when they got to the car. However, it turns out when the police got to the car, Diana's body was missing. We don't know why or where it went, but again, this felt very just like, oh, you know, we want to make, we don't want the police to find out what's going on, so we have to keep them in as much disbelief as possible. And I thought this was just dumb. The detective doing the interviews is pissed. He thinks this is all a big prank because these three aren't the only ones who've been in the woods wanting to check out the Roanoke house. And Todd reminds the detective that Diana's on the footage they shot, but he blows that off. I don't know why he blows that off. It's kind of dumb. I mean, it's literally on the footage. You can just check the camera. It's right there. And the detective warns them to never go near the house again, or they'll be arrested for trespassing. So obviously, they're obviously, you know, being watched now because they're, you know, going near the house and everything. So I just thought all this was really convenient. I kind of thought this was a dumb scene. I wish the police would have listened to them, but overall I thought this was kind of dumb, really didn't work, and it really does go with the rest of the episode with how, like I said, convenient it gets. So Lee, Audrey, and Dillon make it to the Polk farm, but it's getting late. They want to be out of there before the moon rises, and Dillon's going to get the Polk truck while Lee and Audrey quickly check out the buildings for Monet. Lee tells Audrey she'll grab the tapes, and Audrey says that if the truck starts and Lee's not there, they'll just leave without her, because I mean, it's every man for himself right now, and I like that. I like that it's all their survival. So Lee comments that she can get the tape. She makes it back to the truck. She races into the barn where she was held. Audrey grabs a gun from the building where she was tied up and finds Monet hiding there. And like I said, I was really hoping that they give Monet something of substance to do, because most of this half of the season has just been her either ridiculing Lee for turning her into an alcoholic or just saying something stupid. And unfortunately, Monet was resorted to just cracking a bunch of one-liners and really not doing much of anything that substantial, and I was kind of disappointed. Angela Bassett is a really great actress, but it seems like every season they give her nothing to work with, and she was really good when she played Lee, but as Monet, they haven't really done much of their character, and I was kind of disappointed. I really thought they could have done a lot more with her, and they haven't at all utilized her at all really that well, and she's hiding there. Unfortunately, she's in pretty good shape physically. So they hear the truck start, they're about to run out. When one of the Polks arrives, Audrey then tapes him while he threatens to slowly murder them, and satisfied that she won't be charged with murder, she shoots him in the head, which that was, again, really convenient, just to get away from the Polks. And I thought they could have done some more interesting stuff with Monet, but no, they didn't. Audrey and Monet then run outside to find the other surviving Polk has actually stabbed Dillon, and is hightailing it out of there after spotting the butcher's people approaching with torches. So what was the point of Dillon? I don't get it. I don't get what the point of Dillon's character was. It seemed like he was there, and now he's just gone, and I don't know why they introduced him in the first place. It didn't really seem like he had much of a purpose other than for someone to know that something is going on. But again, he's dead, so there's not really any reason to really focus on him. I thought overall this was kind of dumb the way they did that, but it kind of is reminiscing what happened to Cricket with what happened to Cricket with the Butcher. I'm starting to think that didn't actually happen, but I don't really know. But Audrey and Monet then run all the way back to the house. Audrey asks the question we all want to answer to: why did they come back? And Monet doesn't think they had any choice. At least the house offers some protection. Audrey points out that Dillon was in the military and he was killed, so how are they supposed to survive? A good scene, but again, this episode is just so fast-paced that there's not really enough time for us to really see them talk. And Audrey thinks that Lee's probably dead, but Monet really isn't so sure about it. So Audrey makes her case for her dead Lee by pointing out that Lee would have never left the tape behind if she was alive, since the only way to prove their innocence, and Audrey has it, will use it to show they did what they had to survive. So Monet grabs a camera, she plays a tape which shows them cutting pieces off Lee, as well as Lee's confession that she killed her husband, and now they know the real reason why she wanted to retrieve the tape. So as they listen to the tape, we see Lee, she's crawling through the woods with a pig close by. Someone flashes by the camera, and the pig disappears, and then Lee's given the pig's heart to eat. She doesn't resist. Just really creepy stuff overall, the way that was done, but I thought overall was a good way of them finding out what Lee did, but again, this episode just becomes very pointless after a certain point. So the three of my Roanoke fans are back out in the woods at night, and the blood moon is high in the sky above them. They're excited the video of the ghost has gone viral after being up just an hour, and they're trending on Twitter. They head back to the house, walking by the spot where Mason was burned alive in season 1, as we know. So they spot Lee in the woods, and when Todd tells her that he's a huge fan, she kills him. She literally kills him right there, and Lee, for some reason, is now possessed. And this made absolutely no sense to me. How did she get possessed? Why did this happen to her? None of this seemed like it made any sort of sense. I mean, yeah, you can make the argument that Lee wanted Flora, and the deal she made with Skathatch was that she'd do anything that Skathatch told her to, but we didn't see Skathatch, we didn't hear anything about Skathatch, so how the fuck did Lee get possessed? I have no idea. This just felt very much like, oh, we need to kill some characters, so the only way to do that is to get Lee to be possessed, and it just didn't really work at all. We see Milo and Sophie run off screaming. They stop and fall to the ground, unable to process the fact that Lee just murdered Todd. I mean, they can't believe that someone who they've studied intently and cared very much for has killed Todd. Looking up, they see wooden stick figures hanging in the trees over their head. They take off running again. They come upon the production trailer with dead bodies still outside, and when they see a man emerge from the trees, bloody, they lock themselves in the trailer. They think the guy is Ambrose, an actor from season 1, and they notice all the monitors. They see Shelby's dead, then they spot Audrey in the bedroom, and I did like that they're starting to realize that this is actually real, what's actually going on. Now, they're completely confused here. They don't really know what's going on. They don't know if this part of the show or reality, and I thought this was a pretty good way of showing the way that reality TV can be very manipulative and the way it can trick people into thinking things, and they don't for a second really know what's going on. They remember Todd is dead, so therefore it must be real. So I did like the way that they were able to figure out what was going on very quickly. But meanwhile, inside the house, Monet needs a drink, while outside Lee is slowly approaching the front door, coming for Audrey or Monet. And again, Monet just seems to be the drunk in this show. There's just nothing really else to her except that, and I was quite disappointed. I really wanted to do more stuff with her, but they never really did. And Milo and Sophie even call the police, but the cops obviously don't believe them. I don't know why. I mean, there's so much evidence that they could do. It just seems to me the cops are lazy, so I don't know why they don't just believe them, but they watch as Lee enters the house. Sophie thinks they can make it back there and stop her, and Milo's against going to the house, but Sophie says they have to save Monet and Audrey. And the way they were setting up Sophie, I'm like, okay, Sophie is going to be the one to survive. I thought that she was going to be having to kill everyone, and we were going to have a huge twist where she actually ends up being the sole survivor of the show. That's what I thought they were really going to do. It just seemed like it would kind of make sense. Taissa Farmiga hasn't been on in a while. She has a very good presence to her, and she overall is a good character. She has all the qualities of a final girl. I really thought she was going to be the one to survive, but they carefully step outside looking for Ambrose. They don't spot him, but they do see the blood moon is still overhead, so obviously they know what's about to happen. Monet and Audrey then drinking. They're trying to figure out what to do. Audrey's still sure that Lee's dead, and then they hear a noise downstairs. And they quietly move toward the bedroom door. They spot Lee in the hallway staring up at the moon. They don't realize that she's possessed, and even when she tells them that their vile presence divides the sacred ground. Now, I don't really know if Lee was possessed. I feel like that's the only argument to make, but to me it seemed like she was, that there's really nothing else to prove that she wasn't. So Monet threatens her with telling the cops that she's a murderer. Lee, who's not Lee anymore, pushes Monet over the railing. Monet lands on the ground floor, impaled on a piece of wood, but not yet dead. Lee then turns her attention to Audrey, but Audrey fights back. Audrey manages to briefly escape, runs down the stairs with Lee hot on her heels. I will admit this was definitely intense, and that's something I will give American Horror Story, that the season in general has been very intense and scary, but again, this just felt like it was just there to create tension. Audrey stumbles, she grabs a piece of wood, she stabs Lee, she runs out the front door, and Sophie and Milo then make their way toward the house, with Sophie videoing their journey, talking about what they've seen. She says the people are dead everywhere, the police won't listen, and the fact that she's still taking a video of this, I think really is a lot to say about her character, the way they're so obsessed with this, and even the fact that they know that this is real, they're still gonna video all this because they want to be the ones to make sure that they have the, that they have as much evidence as they need, and also the fact that, the police won't listen, they're on their way to help Audrey and Monet, also for their blog and everything, but Milo thinks they're lost, wants to turn around, but then they spot the house, and Lee races from the house. She starts to climb down to the stairs into the cellar. Lee catches up with her before she begins to descend. She stabs her in the neck. She kicks her backwards down the stairs. And Milo and Sophie then see Lee outside. Then they spot the butcher and her followers approaching the house. The butcher slices Dillon's stomach open, pulls out his intestines, just really graphic stuff overall. Milo and Sophie are then about to make a run for it, but Lee is standing right in front of them. The next footage is presented after this warning we see. And we see this footage, which I thought was kind of cool the way this was done. It said, what you're about to see was recovered from the iCloud account registered to Todd Allen Connors, and I'm wondering who that was. I feel like we're going to meet that character next week. It's presented in this raw form. The images are graphic, violent, and deeply disturbing. Sensitive viewers should refrain from watching, and really, I mean, things get really graphic here. Milo and Sophie are captured. They're brought before the butcher. Lee tells them to present themselves for slaughter. They beg for their lives. They're thrown to the ground, and they're then placed on spikes, and they're burned alive. And I will say there were some pretty cool shots here. They're very reminiscent of the Blair Witch, like the upright shots of Sophie's nose, but right when they thought that I could make these characters interesting, I thought they were going to kill Milo, but Sophie was going to be used for some reason, maybe because she looked like Shelby or just something about her. I thought that Sophie was going to be spared. But no, they just kill both of them. So again, what the fuck was the point of these characters? There was no reason to introduce these three My Roanoke Nightmare, characters. They could have easily used them, but there was no point in doing that, and it completely lacks any sort of empathy I had for them, any sort of care I had for them is gone, because all this seemed like it was just there just so Lee could kill three more people and make a sacrifice so that way Audrey, God forbid, didn't have to die. It just felt really dumb, very convenient, and I don't know why they went in this direction. It just felt very, very off from the rest of this season. So, finally, for some reason, police cars them race to the house the next day. I don't know why. I guess they found evidence or something. I have no idea. Why didn't they find evidence before is beyond me. The officers find Milo and Sophie still on the spike, still smoldering and unrecognizable. And inside the house, they discover Monet on the stake at the base of the stairs. They call in multiple casualties. They request the coroner. I don't know why they don't realize that they're dead. They're like, oh, maybe we can help them. I mean, they're dead. I mean, someone literally has their intestines ripped out. Monet is impaled. Shelby has her throat slit. You don't live from these kind of things. And they find Lee still alive but unable to stand. She begs for them to get her out of this hellhole. They help her to the police car and then spot Audrey crawling out of the cellar. She asks if they're real, and then Lee leaves the car, says, Audrey, thank God. Audrey calls her a murderer. She grabs a cop's gun who was helping her walk, and before she can shoot Lee, she's actually gunned down by officers, obviously because this is a former police officer that they're about to kill, as she's about to kill, so Audrey's just dead right off the bat. I'm glad that she was dead. I really did not care much about Audrey's character, to be honest with you. Lee's back in the car, and thank God that Lee was the one to survive. I'm happy to see that Lee's the one to survive. Now, the police believe that Audrey was the killer, radioing the shooting as in suspect down, and they think that Audrey was actually the one that was the killer, as we know was Lee, and that is the way this episode ends. Very strange, very messy episode overall, but let's just get in this episode and where I think we're going to go for the finale next week. So, I want to preface that I did not hate this episode. I didn't hate it. I didn't think this was a bad episode. I just felt this was a very rushed episode. I mean, you introduce this character of the three My Roanoke Nightmare fans, and there's a lot you can do with that, really. There's so much they could have gone with this direction. These three could have maybe helped them leave the house. These three maybe could have, been the ones to expose Lee. Maybe they were there because they were going to help, maybe stop this from happening. Maybe they were going to confront the butchers. I mean, there were just so many things they could have done. Sophie, particularly, I think, could have easily done something more substantial here. She could have gone away. Milo could have been killed. And Audrey could have been the one that was burned at the stake. It just would have made a lot more sense if they did that. I don't know why they killed Sophie. Sophie, to me, seemed like she was going to be the final girl. And for some reason, they completely waste her. I mean, this is Thaisa Farmiga, who most people regard Violet as one of the best characters the show has ever had. I don't know why they didn't just keep her. I mean, it made no sense to me that they use her so sparingly. It was so weird the way they did that. Now, I do kind of like that American Horror Story is using popular actors less because they're trying to use more unknown ones that they haven't used before. I think it's kind of cool, but this is Thaisa Farmiga. This is how you used her. I was very disappointed by that. There was so much they could have done with these characters, and they just didn't use them at all. Dillon as well. What the hell was the point of his character? I have no idea. I don't know why he was here. To me, it just seemed like this was just to show that Sydney was a dick, which we already knew Sydney was a dick that didn't care about any of them. So why they reiterated this, I don't really know. This, to me, seemed like it was just there to, I guess, save time to the episode because they didn't really have much else to do with it. But this is an episode to me where I really feel would have benefited more if it was stretched out. If this episode was maybe 20 or 10 minutes longer, 10 or 20 minutes longer, I would have loved this episode. I think this could have been a really great episode. I think they really could have fleshed out the characters, but because the fact this episode was only 34 minutes in length, there really wasn't much they could do with this, and it really just became very, very convenient. Lee becoming possessed makes no sense to me. I don't know why she was possessed here. And Audrey dying, I knew was going to happen. Monet as well. This is a character that had absolutely nothing to do this entire second half of the season. All she did was she cracked some jokes, she drank, but they didn't really do anything else with her except for the fact that she just was a drunk, and there was nothing else to her besides that. I wanted something more to her character, but they didn't really do that. They didn't even get to, we had that whole interesting stuff in episode 6 where you had that scene between Lee and Monet, which I thought is still one of the best scenes that this show has given us. Maybe one of the best scenes American Horror Story in general has ever given us. The way they personified these two and showed how different these two really are and how the same they've become, but they never really expand upon that besides the 6th episode. And that's something that really did piss me off here, is that this second half, after Shelby killed herself, seemed like it was just about who's gonna die next, and it should never be just that. Yes, that's obviously a big part of it, but they didn't really focus on the characters in the way that they were in the first half, and that really did piss me off. Now, moving forward, I do like the fact that Lee is the one that survived. I predicted that this was going to happen. I'm happy that it happened because Lee is the perfect person to survive. I mean, this entire second half was revolved around Lee. Did she kill, is she the killer everyone thinks she is? Is she as polarizing as everyone thinks she is? And the fact they bring back Lana Winters is a really cool idea. I never finished Asylum, but I feel like I kind of have to before watching next week's episode, so I will have watched Asylum, before I view next week's episode. I just feel like I kind of have to if they're bringing back a character like Lana Winters. I just feel like I have to do that. But either way, I'm interested in seeing the way that goes down, and I feel like there's still some sort of bigger twist here. I'm hearing a theory that Shelby and Matt were actually the killers, but it doesn't really make much sense now, the fact that they're both dead. I think Lee is definitely heavily involved in this, a lot more than we think. I think Skate Thatch is definitely a big part of this. Those characters, definitely, there's something more going on with them. I mean, the fact we haven't seen the Butcher, there's definitely a reason why. I don't know if it's because Lee became the Butcher, but just in general, there's definitely a lot more going on with that. I hope that the next week's episode really does make up for how messy and convenient this episode really was, because again, this episode could have been really, really interesting. You had all great stuff there. The first 10 minutes I thought were really, really great, but everything else was so rushed, so convenient, and just in general very, very unnecessary. I don't know why Dillon was here. I don't know why the 3 of my Roanoke Nightmare fans were here. It was a really cool idea what they did with those 3 characters. They just should have maybe used them for maybe next week's episode. Maybe have one of them live past next week's episode. Have a scene where Sophie confronts Lee and looks at her, realizing that Lee is not the person she thought she was. They could have done so much with that, and they completely just threw it away. I don't know why they did that. I think it was very unnecessary for them to do that. Ryan Murphy once again let us all down. He teased Taissa Farmiga. Everyone was looking forward to seeing her, and she was a very one-note character that I thought could have been something really great, but unfortunately they just didn't really use him that well. But overall, guys, in my review, let me know what you guys saw this episode. I'm looking forward to next week's finale. I like that next week's finale is about Lee's court case. It's something that we really haven't done before, because it looks like next week is more like American Crime Story than American Horror Story, so that's kind of cool the way that's going to be. I have really enjoyed the season overall. I will definitely say that. I'll talk more about the season next week, but that's my review. Hope you enjoy it. We'll see you guys in my next, which will be for another review, and I'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.